Hey everyone, we
Okay.
are back here today with a very special guest, Martine de Luna. I pronounced that Spanish, even though it's French, sorry. Um,
It's a
she,
mix. My first name is French and my surname is Spanish.
okay, perfect. Then I pronounced it correctly.
You did.
So we are here today. She helps guide feminine women through courtship and marriage. And she has a lot of unique perspectives on masculine, feminine energy, what she had, you know, told me about before we started this. It's not what we actually think. And I have a lot of questions for her today. I'm not going to go over all of the intros and things like that because this is specifically for men to really kind of get us on the right path. So I just want to really jump in because in one
Yeah.
of your posts, you state being a biologically feminine woman is important for a marriage to work. Right?
Oh yeah.
We're jumping in hardcore right away. So can you explain a little bit more by what you meant by that?
Yeah. So just a background of why I use this language. So I teach from a lens of the biology and the brain, right? It just makes it more tangible, and especially for women, like we like to get caught up in stories and things like that. But to be able to give women, like the context for why men are this way and why we're this way, it helps to understand our brains and our bodies. Right. So that's kind of like the language I use. So when I say biological woman, biological feminine woman, I really mean the traits that are native to all females as accorded by natural law. And the same for males, like the biological traits that are native to all males as accorded by natural law. And natural law will be the cornerstone of ideologies, of dogma, religion, and all of those things, because we live in a reality where we're subject to these universal laws. So it just kind of like simplifies it for people and makes things actionable, doable, practical for both men and women.
Okay. Well, can you explain
Yeah.
some of those biological
Mm.
roles? Like how can a biological
Mm.
woman really lean
Yeah.
into the what her biology says in a marriage?
Okay. Where are my so I don't know if you're going to see this video, but I have visual aids. My favorite visual aids are the lion and the lioness. Okay. So nature is truth, right? Like what we observe in nature is truth. And in nature, males have always been and forevermore will be the protectors and providers of the territory that females and offspring occupy. So I like to dial human beings into that as well. Because when we live by what is fundamentally true and observable, then the things that confuse us, about what we're supposed to do and what, like we could do and what we have the right to do, it kind of like has a cornerstone to back it, to kind of like have a foundation of. So like women, for instance, we are like more sensitive than men. Like our nervous systems are just wired that way because in the wild, we had to adapt to have peripheral reference points, vision, and sense of safety. Right? That's the difference between a woman's brain and a man's brain. That's why we can think of a gazillion things at one time, and men can literally think of nothing. Like, there was a video I watched sometime a while back on the University of Pennsylvania, did a study that men actually have the capacity to think of nothing, and they are still, they're still functional. But women, we're just wired to kind of like think of a million different things at the same time. And that's why we make good mothers and teachers and carers of children and nurses and things like that, while the experience of male are achievers. I mean, like, why do you think the most famous artists and uh, um, uh, like creators in the world are men? It's because they have the power of focus. They can focus their will and direct their will towards something productive. And I know like the feminists are going to be all like, well, that's the patriarchy. No, it's like male and female differences in the brain and in the biology, right? So I like to simplify it that way. And a lot of people get mad at me, and a lot of people get annoyed at me, but I'm just keeping it real, especially in marriage, right? So I'm also not one of those women that says, oh, the little wife has to be like the barefoot pregnant wife in the kitchen. Not at all, because women are also powerful in their own right. I mean, have you ever tried to contend with a female lioness? She will eat you, right? So she's raw power, and women are powerful too. We just don't quantify power and strength on a masculine, like grading scale, so
Right.
to speak,
Okay, I need
right?
to pause you right there because you said so many good things. And I really want to go
Okay.
back to that one part where you're like, the feminists are going to freak out, because I
Oh,
never
they are.
actually thought about that, because I had that question too, right? Well, is it just because, we were so oppressed that we weren't able to make such grand achievements? However, when you said that, there have been uh, memorable females throughout history. And the
There
first thing that
have.
came to mind was Mother Teresa. And she
Yeah.
wasn't a rocket scientist. She wasn't,
No.
a conqueror. She was a mother. She was the mother,
Yeah.
right? Hugging
The
everybody,
mother.
giving
Yeah.
love to everybody. So that, I think, kind of
Yes.
backs up your point that, and I love what you said, nature is truth. I've never actually heard that before. Did you make that up?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I want to credit that to Sasha Tessick. So he's a doctor, and he teaches the concept of Germanic New Medicine, which is basically the study of your blueprint as a biological man or woman. So I directly mentored under him, and all of my understanding around like the brain and the body and the biology, and these conflicts about our identity, like am I male or am I female? That's all like the founded through Germanic New Medicine. So just wanted to mention that, so I credit him properly for some of the terms that I will be using.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
perfect. And I know that we were about to talk about marriage, but I'd like to digress because that was so
Yeah.
interesting what you just said.
Yeah.
For men and women who are super confused about today's world, where we're like, what is our identity?
Hmm.
And you know as well as I do, just from being coaches in this space, that there's a lot of
Yeah.
polarity and a lot of hatred towards each sex, and like almost
Mm.
refusal to play into the biology, like the denial of truth, let's
Yeah.
say.
The denial
how
of,
can
yeah,
we
observable
find
truth. Yeah.
how can we find our way back to equilibrium? How can we find our way back to truth?
Mm.
And should we? Or is this a thing that could be good for us?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I always bring it back to biology and humanity, right? And so when I teach men and women, like let's say courtship, right? We have a lot of like reversals right now in how that's done. Like, oh, like women can run after a man. Yes, they could, absolutely. But then that's where you go and look at nature harmonizing itself. Like if a woman is pursuing a man, she's in the masculine energy. And of course, he's going to be more in like the feminine energy. I mean, polarity is beautiful, but polarity is the truth. And, universal laws are we live by them. We cannot outcreate these universal laws. Like there's always going to be one that is polarized towards the other, and one is going to be feminine, one is going to be masculine. I mean, this is the law of polarity, the law of gender, the universal laws. So yes, sure, a woman can pursue a man. Now we have women proposing to men, right? I ask all of the men that I know, at least in my circle, and they're like, there's something wrong with that, right? Because it doesn't feel natural. Because in nature, that doesn't happen. So we kind of like, and this is why this is so elementary to children. They're like, in nature, they're the ones peacocking and competing and like vying for the female, right? So why should that be any different for biological human beings that are subject to the universal laws, the same laws that these beings are subject to? So yes, we can intellectualize and we can create ideas and ideologies even to live by. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But ultimately, if we're going to go back to biology, if we're going to go back to legacy and like continuing the human race, women still going to have babies with men. Like that's it. That is it. It just always just goes back to that. And I know like when I bring that up, that's where I get, the people getting angry. And it's like, but two women can be mothers too. I'm like, yes, they absolutely could, you know, but it's not going to be biologically truthful to nature. And my teacher made an example of this. He's like, you have bees. right? Bees, the function of male bees is just to impregnate the queen bee and then die, right? And so you have a bunch of dead bees around a beehive. That's their biological purpose. And then the females, they're the ones that make the hives, the honey, protect the queen. And so we could say that females are more superior than men, but the honeybee hive would not be in existence without all those dead male drones that were used for their seed, right? So we can't escape what we naturally are. To continue anything, we need each other. To create societies, we can't like just rely on the warrior energy of men. We need the lover and magician energy too to create families that will populate society and propagate our lineages. So we can rewrite this any way we want. We're always going to fall back on the cornerstone of biological truth. It's just how it is.
Wow. Yeah, I'm getting absolute
Yeah.
chills. And I love that you also brought up warrior, lover, king, magician.
The archetypes. I
Yeah, the
love
four
them.
archetypes.
Yeah.
We did a whole masterclass on this, and men are discovering different parts of themselves. But like just really diving into this because it's so interesting. And I love how you are not afraid to say these things, because right now we live in cancel culture, right? So
Oh yeah,
saying
I'm
anything
canceled
is
all
like,
the time. Yeah.
it's so good because it is the truth. And like you said, you can't run from truth. It always shines
Cannot.
through. Nature is going to keep doing what nature does. You cannot change that, right? That's why
Yeah.
like lions and gorillas and stuff sometimes attack their owners at the zoo, because they're animals. Like they are not
They're
meant to be put in cages, and they will biologically go back to what is natural. So
mm-hmm.
going back to that, what you're saying is that, women can obviously, like, you can be gay, you can be trans, you can be whatever you
Yeah,
want,
you can
but
be whatever
the
you want.
foundation is still going to be biologically man and woman, right? And then you're
Yes,
talking
yes.
about the lion and the lioness and peacocks, and how, in nature, the man pursues. So in
Yeah.
today's culture, we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of men who don't know if they should pursue. They're kind of afraid because women are giving a lot of harsh criticism and feedback. And then B, we
Yeah.
have a lot of men who are like, it's not fair. Why should I have to court her, or,
Yeah.
whatever? And then we have the men who are like, we would say old school, right? They're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
open the door. I'm going to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And so I tend to find that if we go back to biology, and it's
Mm-hmm.
equal, right? The man is
It is
courting, the woman
equal.
is receiving, and like they're
Yeah.
they're passing on that support and energy and whatever. They usually
Mm-hmm.
tend to have good equilibrium. But we're not seeing a lot of that. So do you
Yeah.
have any tactical tips that maybe you give to your clients who are
Yeah.
female,
Mm-hmm.
ways that maybe they can surrender some of that
Yeah.
masculine energy, where they can be courted, where they can attract, because it's about
Mm-hmm.
attracting, right? So
It is
maybe
magnetism.
describe the feminine essence. Like, how can she lean into that? Because I know some women try, but they try like with a
Mm-hmm.
masculine energy, right?
Right. There you go. Right. So like everybody has a native essence to them. I personally am a female with a feminine essence. I have like zero, well, I do have masculine, like energy that I can direct, but natively, like I'm female. I like how I am responded to as a feminine essence being. I like that my husband is a very masculine like being. I live within that essence, right? But for some women, so first of all, we are epigenetic creatures. We inherit patterns, right? And like if those of us who grew up in Western society are looking at the kind of patterns we're created, it should come as no surprise that a lot of things are inverted, especially in terms of like the pursuit and who goes first and who pursues who. So like for women, so I have a program where I teach women, like how to embody these biologically appropriate feminine traits. I literally have to tell these women, like, stop pushing and proving how great you are, how much money you make, like the career that you have and the number of degrees that you have. Men literally don't care, right? It'll make for interesting conversation, but that's not why a man like marries you, for instance, if he wants to get married, right? And when I say men, I'm talking about, again, biologically appropriate males, this activating language. And I'm going to borrow some words from Dr. Sasha. And he's like, a healthy male has one thing on his agenda, and that is to create his territory. So we see that in the savannah. We see that in silverback gorillas, like they possess a portion of nature that is in their domain. It is their domain. They have dominion over that. Men are the same. By nature, they need to achieve, to succeed, and to have meaning in life. This is why Stoicism is so big among like the traditionally masculine community right now, because these are like the core values of masculine consciousness, right? So wisdom, courage, bravery, and loyalty, right? These are pillars of excellence that men who are biologically men, are open to. And these men are not afraid of hardship. These men are not afraid of like saying, I will literally direct my will to protect women and children, right? But women tend to think that they can do that too, which they can. But I always tell women, when you direct your will and your protection against something, biologically, that's what females do to their offspring. They don't do that to the male. So that's my first lesson to women when they're in courtship. I'm like, you think he cares about like how much money you make, what your degrees are, how, like you've climbed the corporate ladder or whatever? Maybe you're looking for another woman who thinks that way. But if you're looking for a mate, if you're looking for a lifelong partner who will direct his will to take care of you, to protect you, to provide for you, he is looking for a biologically feminine, appropriate female. Because males in nature don't need relationships. Why do you think that a male lion can mate with 20 female lions? Because they don't need to be committed to her. They just need to sow their seed. But men are also, we still have that mammalian part of males still have that mammalian part of us. So if you're going to compete with a man over what men compete with other men for, you land on him with masculine energy, not feminine energy. And that will not create polarity. It will not create attraction. It'll create interest, like she's interesting, but she's a little bit, and feminists say, oh, he's intimidated by me. No, he's intimidated by the masculine energy that you're putting out, because in nature, there's this thing as masculine hierarchy, right? They're the betas and the alphas. And the alphas keep the little beta lions around them, not so that those lions can mate with the females, but so they can have like dominion.
Right. So it turns into not a courtship, but a competition.
It turns it
He's not
into a
intimidated
competition.
by you. He will not court you. He will see what he
You've
can get from it on a subconscious level. Like he knows that
on
he
a
likes you
subconscious
because
level.
on some instances you are probably releasing your feminine energy, but you're trying too hard to be impressive, trying too hard to be the ruler
Yeah.
that, a masculine man will not be attracted to that. He's not turned on. A male lion is not turned on by another male lion.
No,
They
that's
fight,
why they keep the little
you
beta
know?
lions around. They're like, okay, if one of them dies, that's good because at least I'm still alive. My lionesses are still alive. So in in like the male world, right? These are and we don't, by the way, we don't use the term betas and alphas in human relationships. They don't exist there. But these are like, let's say, the difference between the men who know how to pursue women and the men who don't. In their language, I don't know the language over there in the West, but here the literal translation is men who have game. Because game is in nature. It's a natural part of the courtship process to have game, to have a strategy to court women and be successful in claiming a woman into a relationship, right? But what women tend to do with their masculine energy is say, oh, because women can do what men can do, then we can pursue men like men pursue women. No, right? It will work, but the kind of man that you will attract will likely be the men like you described earlier, Elise, where they're kind of passive. They're kind of like, why should I? like work so hard for her. You have men who are like not fully in the male hemisphere of their brain, basically. Like the male territorial part of the brain is closed off, and you have men that are more in like the estrogenic part of the brain, the left hemisphere of the brain, which is more female
Well,
orientation,
those are the
right?
men who will adopt more of the feminine traits, but the men who are passive, I wouldn't even say that they're
Mm-hmm.
not in their masculine stage. I think that they are, but they're not sensing the feminine enough to provide and protect, right? And
Yeah,
this is something that was
yeah,
really, and I only
that's
speak
true.
from the heart because I operated out of my masculine for so long, thinking that I needed to, and sometimes I still struggle with it, right? Like, because I am a solo business owner
Mm,
and stuff, but I've started to say to myself, and this might sound bad to some people, because I used to be, hey, I appreciate how hard you work. Let's go 50-50. Let's be partnership. Let's be a team. And then as I started working with men who were very wealthy, and who really did a lot for themselves, none of the women that they were picking, they cared about, they didn't want to split 50-50. They picked women who were almost damsels in distress, women who they could help, women who needed their support, their love, who adored them. And I started to understand, the less I do, the more I get, is what I got from that. Because
yeah,
men live to serve. They live to serve, and they
yeah.
will love to serve if they feel appreciated and respected for it. Where they stop
Mm-hmm.
feeling appreciated and respected, that's when they become resentful. That's when they're like, why would I do that? Right. But if they sense from a
Yeah.
female that she's like full of gratitude, thank you for opening the door, thank you for doing the dishes. And there's this one video going around right now, I don't know if you've seen it, where the wife is like, I'm not going to thank my husband for washing the dishes or changing the diaper or changing the trash. She's like, I'm not going to thank him for doing things that he would have to do if he were by himself. And, it's like, on one hand, you can understand the concept of like, yes, you don't want to just be like fawning over someone for doing something so easy, but then also, why not? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what is the loss that you get from giving gratitude?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
you
And a lot
losing?
of
Power?
a lot
And
of
then you're
women
trying to
think
be the
that a
man.
man's yeah, a lot of women think that a man's love language, like primal love language is physical touch, but it's actually words of appreciation. Like ask any man. Like because we all need physical touch. I mean, like come on, when you get into relationships, it's part of it. But ask a man what he appreciates in a woman. It's when he is seen as a man, when he is appreciated as a man. And a lot of that is the words that she uses, that she confers onto him, the sight that she confers onto him through her words of appreciation. So that's why, and again, referencing Dr. Sasha, there is nothing more nourishing to a man than a woman's smile. She doesn't have to do anything. Like you literally just smile at a man, you've made his day, right? And why is that? Because the biological purpose of man is to be useful. And again, I'm talking the biological terms. If they don't feel useful, they don't feel meaningful, they don't have a purpose. And this gives us a lot of data for why 70% of unaliveness, like taking lives, is occupied by men. I mean, if we want to talk about where men are dominating, they're dominating in that because men's biological purpose is to feel and be useful. If they don't, then they're like, that's why the whole reference to the male bees, like, okay, I did my biological purpose. Now I can be killed by the females, right? You know, it's there's a mirroring to that in the experience of men and women because, we live in a very gynocentric society. Those of us who grew up in the 80s, the 90s, I guarantee you all our TV shows, all the commercials, the Barbie dolls, right, that we played with, all had sublime messaging for us that we're better, that the men are just, like we're just objects to them, or that they are these physical creatures that prey on women. And then we delete all of the other factual evidence that more men occupy the roles that are necessary for society to function. You hardly see female sewage workers. ever, right? You hardly see women digging oil rigs in the middle of the ocean, right? So again, we have to like appreciate this first as women, that the nutrient that men need is not the things we do for them, but it's how we regard them, the sight we confer on
Oh,
them.
I love that.
That is
How
so
we
important.
regard
Yeah.
them. And it's so true. And
How we regard them.
and how we regard them in front of others. If you
Yes.
because women will use words of affirmation as a weapon, right? And talk badly about their husbands, talk badly about him in front of
Mm.
everybody, make him feel stupid in front of other people. And that's like the worst thing that you can ever do in general, anybody, to their partner, is make them look like a fool in front of others, especially to a
Yeah.
man who has his territory and his domain. If you start
Yes.
threatening the territory that he's worked so hard and built up, his, maybe his essence, his how the outside world sees him, he doesn't need his right hand person creating the crack in his empire. That is when he
Yes, that
will
is so true.
subconsciously turn on you, right? That is when he will seek
Mm-hmm.
outside love and validation, because that is now filling the crack of his territory. And God forbid you
Yeah.
do this in your own home with your own husband and your own children, and you don't even know that calling him stupid or calling him an idiot or berating him for not getting the milk or what the hell ever is creating
Mm-hmm.
cracks in the empire, because you're making him feel like a failure and its territory. And obviously, if someone is not doing the work and they're not living up to it, um, there's conversations to be had, but you can do it in a way that is more sophisticated and within partnership, as opposed
Yeah.
to creating an enemy out of your spouse. So
Mm-hmm.
now I would like to just flip this, because we're on such a good
Sure.
we're on such a good roll. We gave
I'm
some
enjoying
tips for the
this.
women. I am too. I think everybody listening is going to really, really love this. So for men,
Yeah.
let's say that they're in a
Mm.
marriage or in a relationship, and maybe they haven't been stepping in their masculine, or maybe their marriage is struggling and they see that their wife is more masculine. Do you have any tips for
Mm.
the man himself? What can he
Yeah.
do? Maybe in, like, because we see red pill, like, oh, you got to be aggressive, you got to do this, you got to ignore her, like there's so much toxic advice out there. Do we have anything that can
Yeah.
really inspire the feminine to come out and to
Yeah.
get that marriage back in order or relationship?
Yeah. So definitely like what I advise to husbands is very, very basic, right? For a woman to actually respect you, you have to be you have to earn that respect too. So the red pill content where you just ignore her, you like don't look at her, you don't regard her, that is what a boy would do to another boy or another girl. You know, the whole like, oh, if you like her, be mean to her. It's playground talk. Like, are we 7, 9 years old? Right? Like it reminds me of that scene in that movie, like he's just not that into you, that opening scene where, oh, he's mean to you because he likes you. No, like, this is, like you said, it's very toxic advice. So husbands or partners in long-term relationships, boyfriends, she has to see that you can be the man for her. And you might be thinking like, oh, well, she might feel like I'm controlling. She might feel like, because she's so strong in her opinion, I don't know how to like get in there. There has to come a time, boys, when you put your foot down and say, I will not stand for this. Enough. I love you, but I will not be disrespected and made to feel like a little boy anymore. And you say that grounded. You don't say that all spilling and in your emotions. You don't say it from your feminine energy. Because when you're in a mood and when you have a bad temper, you're in your feminine energy. You're not emotionally strong. So put your foot down and tell your masculinized wife, hey, this will not be tolerated anymore. You think I'm a little boy? I am a man. And they're surprised, kind of like, what? Really? Try it. Because when you prepare yourself, so of course you don't go in there all in your temper and in your tantrum. You go there prepared to be emotionally strong and stable. This is why I encourage men to meditate on Stoic values, right? Because it is not about exerting power over, but it is about allowing yourself to carry that woman in the chaos that she unknowingly is in, and she's using her masculine energy to activate it. A lot of women who are in their masculine energy are actually just really scared to surrender, right? But it's because they're not also mirrored by a strong, grounded masculine presence. And sometimes you do have to put your foot down, right? Because, let's talk about archetypes. Maybe she's in that spoiled little girl, teenager version of herself, and she's making demands on daddy and projecting that on you, and you're just tolerating that. But this is your opportunity for masculine consciousness to rise in you and say, that's enough. I will not tolerate you speaking to me, insulting me on Instagram. I am done with that. I am your husband. And this has happened. This has had to happen, but it is in that moment where a woman, and again, in Germanic New Medicine, we talk about triggering the native responses in the male and in the female. If a woman wants to trigger the masculine response in a man, she has to lean back and give him opportunities to succeed. If you want to trigger the feminine in a woman, your masculine consciousness has to be higher, hierarchically, than her masculine consciousness, right? Because masculine consciousness submits to masculine consciousness, just like in the animal kingdom, the lower males submit to the alpha. Just a different analogy there. So that's my tip for men who are being trampled on.
Yeah, absolutely.
By their woman.
I love that. And with a lot of the men that I work with, it's kind of easier said than done, because if a man has not stepped into his masculine energy and kind of put his foot down in the first place, there's obviously a lot of, previous behaviors that go into that, right? Some childhood trauma, the attraction, the mother wound. So I always say, take a look at like why you haven't stepped into setting boundaries, why you haven't stepped, like what part of this relationship has been serving you in the way that you know how to survive. And then we can kind of really enhance, our boundaries and enhance that masculine energy. And really, because nature is truth, because biology is truth, I always say the second that you do step into boundaries, you're going to see a shift in the energy, because the whoever has the strongest masculine energy will persevere. And so if you step into your masculine and it's stronger than hers, she will have no choice but to surrender into the feminine, or the relationship will break apart, right? And that's why I love that you said, really embody a stoic energy when you go into this, because some men, and this is why you need a coach or a therapist as a man or a woman when you're just exploring these things, because you need to know how to balance. Many men don't know how to balance, and it's a pendulum swing. So they're like, okay, I didn't set boundaries, now I'm going to set boundaries, but then their boundaries are bids for control and aggression and abuse and manipulation. And they don't think that. They're like, I'm just setting a boundary. But no, you're telling someone what to do, trying to control them. And you're doing it in such an aggressive tone that now it is bordered on the edge of abuse and revenge. So you really have to watch and be careful, because there's also, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, but there's also this rhetoric out there of, women who might hit a man and it's abuse. It really is abuse if females hit their husbands.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Talk bad about them. But then there's also the men who say, oh, well, we should be able to hit her back. And the thing about it's because it's self-defense. And the thing about self-defense is, and I'm got this from a book that I'm currently reading called Why Does He Do That? When a man hits a woman back, like the object of self-defense is to protect yourself with the most minimal damage like possible. So if you hit her back, it's no longer self-defense, it's revenge. And you don't want to become the type of person who sees himself become the villain, right? So you want to be able to address all of these things and maintain your own integrity, maintain your own core set of values. Even if someone is egging you on, are you really going to fall to the level of their antagonization? right?
Yeah.
You want to really rise, like, because being a masculine energy also is maintaining a set of core values that you live by on a
Yes.
daily basis, no matter what circumstances come at you. Because the feminine, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, the feminine is meant to test the masculine, because if he's not tested, how will he maintain his territory? How will he
Yeah.
maintain the alpha role? How will he be the
Mm-hmm.
strongest? Right? So
Yeah.
his one partner is not, it's challenging him not to take him off the throne if she's healthy. It's challenging him to force him to see the potential of himself. But sometimes that's emotional
Yeah.
potential as well. Can you maintain your emotional stability without beating me, without killing me, without losing control?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why as men, you need to be like self-responsible for how you hold those emotions, right? Because like I said, a man in his unmetabolized emotions is in his feminine energy, right? And this is where you get like the raging anger, like you want to punch your fists through the door, like I've heard stories of men also not be able to self-hold. And before you even go in front of your woman and erect that boundary, because it is a boundary, but it's an inclusive boundary. It's not meant to shut her out like the red pill rhetoric. It's meant to invite her into safety, into like your masculine energy and your consciousness, right? So there is, like Elise was saying, you have to be responsible for your weak spots as well, because there can be no kinks in that armor. And it's not a armor to shut her out, but it's actually to invite her to lean into you. And I feel like once men have that mastery, then we can start like disrupting that pattern that we've created in our relationships of her just being in the control seat all the time and giving him like the opportunity again for consciousness, masculine consciousness to rise in that relationship and occupy like a rightful role of leadership, right?
Yeah, I
Love
love
this conversation.
that.
Yeah.
I do too, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I do just have one more question.
Sure,
Because
sure.
we talked about in the beginning the provider role, the natural biological, role that men
Mm,
have. It's a common polarizing topic today too, like the divide of money and
yeah.
income. And a lot
Mm,
of men are feeling like they're getting sick of it, and they feel like, she's just using me for money. But from what I'm hearing from you, it's almost biological that why would she not? Because if that is your role, if she's no longer being protected from other lions or whatever, like
yeah.
money is the providership role. So how do you feel
Yeah.
about that, especially like where today's economics are?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
love to know your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So again, this is something, pieces of this I'm going to share from Sasha Tessik's work on biological relationships. Um, we live in a world that has fundamentally changed in terms of like dynamics between men and women. It changed over the last 150 years. I don't think it's really going to go backward from that, but that doesn't mean we can't restore relationships between male and females to be complementary. We can work with this dynamic. So let's say I live in Southeast Asia, okay? And I live in a developing country. I don't live in a first world country. And here, it is common for both the man and the woman to work and to co-provide. The difference is when it comes to the biological roles, I'm very feminine around my husband. I do not speak to him like a man. I speak to him like a woman. I don't know if you notice this, but like if you go to somewhere like Japan or Korea and you encounter interracial relationships, like let's say I have some friends in Japan, they're Filipino women, but they're married to Japanese men. And we talk like Filipinas are like the Latinas of Asia, right? Okay, so we're feisty, we're like fiery, passionate. We have a whole Hispanic lineage and history and a Chinese one too. And the Japanese, the Filipinas who marry like these Japanese gentlemen are very serious. They're very like typically Asian, not emotionally like not emotionally generous, outward. But when they are in that polarized dynamic in their marriages, and these are women who work too, you know, they become an entirely mirror image of their husband. You know, the voice is a little bit more demure and the manner is more feminine. So I would say, like, in the world that we live in, most of us are going to work. Like, most of us are going to have dual income families. It's just the way it is, right? And you know, let's not get into like the whole matrix and it's all like planned by elite people and all of that. But like, let's work around that. We're in this world, but we don't have to operate by the unconscious programming that people have bought into unconsciously. You know, like women acting like men and men now acting like women and being feminized and women being masculinized. We can consciously opt out of that thinking while maintaining the things that allow us to function. So I started off coaching women how to have online businesses. That was the first thing that I started to coach women on. Work at home moms. 12 years ago when I started this, I didn't always teach about relationships. But when I was coaching these moms, what I would teach them is to have a feminine business. Now, what is that? I'm like, if you have babies, if you are like the homemaker, because here in Asia, traditionally, the woman is, you know, like the homemaker, same as in the rest of the world. She's the nester, she's the resourcer of the resources, right? Um, then you find a way for your business to support your roles as a wife, as a mother, as a cook, as a homemaker. And that's what I used to teach women on. And I didn't know back then all of the things that I know now about the female brain and the female biology and how there are biological purposes for why we occupy certain roles, right? But this allows women to co-provide in a way, right? Because the incomes are merging, we're joining bank accounts, everything is for the benefit of the next generation, AKA the offspring, the children, the legacy. But what still is maintained is that biologically appropriate feminine role where you're not out there in the traffic having to brave the corporate structure that was designed for masculine energy. And you can resource, create your business from your feminine essence and in your feminine energy and occupy masculine energy while you work, because we do occupy masculine energy when we serve, when we produce products, when we are like now, like in a coaching role, right? That is masculine energy that you architect as a woman, right? And then you're able to de-animate that part when you're with your partner and you're able to be very biologically appropriately feminine with him, not competing with him to say, hey, like I made more money than you this month. Most women, because of the nature of feminine business, they have a more volatile income than their men. And sometimes that will get to their masculine shadow essence, you know, in the subconscious. And this is where I like require women to be very masterful around sorting through the psyche and sorting through the biological response. And this is really the essence of my coaching, you know, teaching women how to navigate this paradox of like feminine essence, feminine energy, when to animate your masculine energy, when to be present femininely with your partner so that he can feel like the sexual leader in the relationship, the male, right? Because in biology, that's what you call them. They're not just having sex, but they feel like the male. They feel like the protector. They feel like their contribution matters, even if you make money. Dr. Sasha says it's not about the amount of money that a woman makes. It's when she stops seeing him as a male and stops regarding him and his needs as a male that all the conflicts happen in the type of society we live in. So I hope that kind of like paints a picture, Elise, of how we get to be very masterful in this as men and women, but we need to work together. Men understanding how women work, women understanding how men work, and then doing the work to call in For the women, call out masculine consciousness, calling it out to rise in him. And for men, to cherish feminine essence in her and be the deliverer of the provision. Not always money, but even like psychological protection, emotional strength, emotional openness to her.
So good, so powerful. That is a mic drop moment and a perfect place for us to wrap up this call, because like we could talk all day. This was so
We
enlightening.
could.
I'm so glad this is our first time talking as well, and it just brought so much to the surface. So I appreciate you and all the work that you do, and everybody here. Martine de Luna, Martine, I guess you would pronounce it in
Martine
French.
de Luna. Yeah.
De Luna, exactly. So I will link all of her social medias below, any offers that she currently has. And this will not hopefully be our last conversation. I would love to collaborate more on these things.
Yes.
If you have any questions for her, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I just appreciate you so much. So thanks, everybody.